The market breaking the downward trend that we saw last week on Monday, trading higher yesterday yet again. Overall perspective on the market activity we're seeing at the moment?
I think what the market is doing is that they feel that it was oversold last week. I think the press conference put by the interim administrator of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, as well as trader sentiment that they were oversold last week, has pushed the gains we've seen this week, which is close to 1% if you look over Monday and Tuesday.
Well, we had made mention of the fact that we had the rejigging of positions at the NSE and overall of management over on that end, bringing in some calm for investors. Just taking a look at risks, though, that still prevail, because while we've got, the governance issues at the NSE being addressed on the one hand, and we've got Amcon trying to resolve issues in the banking sector as well, are there any risks that the market is still holding at the back of its mind?
Yes, I think the risks we're looking at are there are various other investigations that this Securities and Exchange Commission is supposed to be conducting into market infractions, which they've announced that they're going to charge 260 individuals and entities to the IST, the tribunal, the investment tribunal, to investigate. So people want to see follow through on that. We also want to see reform, because they got an interim administrator in the NSE and they're looking for a new DG of the NSE. But then we want to see reform in the market to stop some of these alleged infractions that happened before from happening again. We also look at some companies like AP, where there have been allegations of financial mismanagement, which SEC is supposed to be investigating, and people want to see the outcome from that. So those are the kind of risks that people are looking at, and as well as Amcon. Will Amcon actually be able to provide the amount of funding as required to help all 8 of the rescued banks?
And looking at some of the question marks that still prevail around Amcon itself, there are question marks for one still surrounding some saying the passage of Amcon and the fact that it will not necessarily improve liquidity at the NSE itself. What's your view on that?
I think what Amcon is meant to do is really is to make sure that rescued banks are in a position to be sold for strategic investor to come in and buy them. No one's going to buy with negative equity. I think that's the primary aim of Amcon. I think the second aim is to help provide the rescued and banks that were not rescued, provide some relief in taking some of the non-performing loans off their books. And that will increase liquidity into the sector. But then you have to counterbalance that with the fact that some of these banks also have to sell down some of their margin facilities to keep in with the new CBN regulation of only not having more than 10% of their portfolio in margin loans, which a lot of them are well above that at the moment, and they have until September to do that. So you have two counterbalancing factors there. So it might help liquidity in a sense of freeing up some of the non-performing loans from the balance sheet, but progressively some of these banks have to sell down some of these equities they have already. Well,
straight from the central bank governor's mouth right here on CNBC Africa on Monday, we had him reiterate that bids on 4 banks have been finalized, where we're looking at 2 foreign firms, local banks, and then a couple of private equity banks as well. Are you happy with the detail that's emerged there? Because thus far, it's really been speculation that's surrounded any merger and acquisition activity over on that end.
I think it's good that he's announced there have been bids, but I think we're at the beginning of a very long process. Amcon management has not been put in place. How Amcon is going to reorganize the non-performing loans, take them off the books, it has not been put in place. I think we're looking at probably a 3, 4, 5 month process before any of those bids can actually be actualized. But it's good that there's been interest, at least in 4 of those banks. We're just hoping that that interest is carried through to the logical end and they're able to come up with a solution that will stop the liquidation of these banks.
Well, with so much still up in the air, Kayode, I mean, the daily increase for most of the individual stocks we're seeing are coming in less than the 5% threshold. And with that, it seems that there's not a lot of appetite for huge risks at this stage. People just waiting for detail to emerge on all those fronts that you've highlighted thus far. So how are you playing the market at the moment?
At the moment, what we're trying to do is looking at the banks, the mid-tier banks like Fidelity, Sky, FCMB, banks like that that have shown interest in acquiring some of these rescued banks. Because those kind of banks, if they acquire, especially some of the bigger rescued banks, it will take them to another level of competition and push them into the top tier of banking. So look at taking positions in some of those banks in that interest. We're looking at the rescued banks themselves. We're looking at selling down positions there because we believe that going by the announcements of CBN, and to some status of some of these banks, the existing shareholders are basically, although CBN is not really coming out forthright say that, have basically been totally wiped out in that process. Now, their share of those rescue banks, if they're recapitalized, is going to be very small. So we're looking at selling down positions there. I think on the food and beverages sector, we're also looking into buying into that sector, although there's some worries over the increase in the international wheat price, which will affect the likes of flour mills, Honeywell flour, Dangote flour. But same with its 50th year celebrations in Nigeria in the 1st of October, leading to the very aggressive Christmas period. We could probably see a increase in sales, especially in the food and beverages sector. And so we're looking to tap into that.
Well, within that fast-moving consumer goods space, a stock that we don't really talk about is National Salt. And some saying at this stage it's holding value and it's been surprising to the upside. Run us through some of your perspective on that stock right now.
Well, National Salt is interesting because National Salt was taken over by the Dangote Group 2 or 3 years ago, and it has had problems in terms of profitability and in getting sorting out the balance sheet as the takeover has gone. Now, what we've seen in the share price, especially from the tender offer that Dangote used to buy it, which was at that time, I think it was in the mid-20s, it went all the way down to single-digit Naira figures, so a lot of investors lost out there. Now, the story is that there's been a turnaround and there's instability and there's going to be some growth in that sector. But I think until we see evidence of that growth in their financials, I think the jury is still out on that stock.
Well, some have highlighted that it's the diversification of its product line that's going to make it more appealing moving forward, in that it is looking to take advantage of the large population, and that is a characteristic for them that is standing out. Have you heard any word of just what kind of diversification we could be seeing?
No, we haven't. To be honest, diversification is the buzzword used by a lot of companies at the moment in Nigeria, but it will be interesting to see what kind of diversification they're looking at.
Well, on that note, Kayode, let's leave it there. Thanks so much for your time this morning.